The engine of the rented SUV whined, battling the 2 hours of sheer ice and swirling snow on I-70 from Denver. I'm Jane, a 32-year-old corporate strategist for Northline, where I spend 50 weeks of the year managing the reputations of billion-dollar corporations. The other 2 weeks? That's when I'm forced to return to Cedar Ridge, Colorado, the high-altitude valley that had always felt less like a hometown and more like a trap. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and the cold creeping into my bones had nothing to do with the outside temperature. It was the familiar chill of impending family drama. On the passenger seat sat a plain white business envelope, glowing menacingly in the dusk. It wasn't a Christmas card. It was an itemized ledger. It held the receipts for a year's worth of my mother's, Clara's, medical expenses. The trips to the specialist in Boulder, the ridiculous co-pays, and the pricey, holistic therapies that were really just weekend spa getaways with a flimsy medical justification. Clara never asked me directly for the money. She was too smart for that. Instead, I'd get the accidental email forward, always with the subject line, "Oh dear, look at this mess," or the trembling phone call lamenting the cost of her platinum-level insurance deductible. I always paid. I paid to stop the calls, paid to avoid the crippling guilt trips, and paid to keep the fragile transactional truce we called a mother-daughter relationship from totally imploding. But this year, the bills had almost doubled, and the accidental forwards had become a weekly nuisance. I parked on the snow-drifted curb. The house was a beacon of fake festive cheer, every window lit up like a big city billboard. An inflatable snowman, tacky and obscene against the dark snowscape, dominated the front lawn. My expensive, practical Denver boots sank into the unshoveled powder. The music, some cheerful, thumping pop Christmas garbage, was audible even from the car. I rang the bell. The music died instantly, and the blurred shadows behind the frosted glass froze. The door opened just a crack, stopped short by the ridiculous, glaringly gold security chain. My mother, Clara, filled the gap. Her hair was a shade of blonde too bright for her age, her face a mask of perfectly applied, festive precision. She wore a deep red cashmere sweater that, I knew, cost more than my first car payment. Her eyes, cold and instantly assessing, dropped to the white envelope in my hand. There was no "Merry Christmas, Jane," only a faint, razor-sharp sneer. Through the gap, I saw my sister, Queen, 24 and perpetually a hot mess, flit past. She was showing off a delicate new gold bracelet to her flannel-clad boyfriend, Denzel. "Isn't it gorgeous, babe? He just gets me," she squealed. The sight of the expensive bracelet, likely paid for with my hard-earned money, made my blood run cold. Clara's attention snapped back to me, her face hardening into granite. "If you're here to beg, go home," she hissed, quiet enough to be venom, loud enough to be a threat. "Mom, I'm not begging," I said, my voice weak in the freezing air. "I just wanted to drop this off. I just wanted to talk." Clara cut me off, her voice suddenly booming for the whole neighborhood to hear. "This house is for family who listen. This house is for family who know their place and respect their mother." Before I could form a response, the oak door clicked shut. It wasn't a slam, but a sound of cold, corporate finality. And then, the brass chain scraped and clicked into its lock track. The message was clear. Eviction. I stood alone on the porch on Christmas Eve, the humiliation burning acidic and hot in my throat. From inside, the music swelled, the laughter resumed, louder this time. I was already forgotten. Fine, I thought. I fulfilled the obligation. Time to drive 2 hours back to Denver and charge a bottle of overpriced wine to my room. You've just witnessed a brutal, cold-blooded family betrayal. Now you know why people go no contact. If you think this is where the story ends, if you think I'm just going to drive away and let this financial fraud disappear into the snow, you're dead wrong. This story is a masterclass in revenge. Don't you dare close this video now. Don't you dare miss the clawback. If you're not ready to commit to seeing justice served, scroll down and tell me in the comments right now why you'd let a snake like this win. Go on, tell me why you won't subscribe. I took one step off the porch when a brilliant white light sliced across the yard, illuminating me and the tacky snowman in a harsh, theatrical spotlight. Headlights. A vehicle, long, black, and polished to a mirror shine, pulled up behind my rental. It was a Lincoln Town Car, the kind that screamed serious old money, the kind you absolutely never saw in Cedar Ridge. The rear passenger door opened, A man, tall and moving with a slow, deliberate grace, unfolded himself from the car. He wore a heavy, charcoal gray wool overcoat with a velvet collar and held a thick, dark wooden cane with a silver head. The porch light caught his face. He had a full, impeccable silver-white beard. My heart didn't just stop. It seized up. I knew that face. I knew that posture. It was impossible. George Whitaker, my grandfather. He was supposed to be dead. Dead in a supposed boating accident off the Cayman Islands when I was in high school. That was the story Clara had peddled. No body, no funeral, just a quiet, fast probate. After which Clara had quit her job and Queen started getting everything her spoiled heart desired. Inside the house, the music abruptly cut off. Deafening silence. The curtain on the picture window twitched. Then, a muffled, terrified gasp. "He's alive!" It was Queen's voice, stripped of all its earlier glee, a reedy, panicked whisper. I could picture Clara on the other side of the oak door, her perfect face pale, her hand shaking over the deadbolt. My supposedly dead grandfather paid no mind to the house or the terrified occupants. Thud, crunch, thud, crunch. His cane hit the stone walkway, followed by the crunch of his shoe in the snow. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, fixed his sharp gaze on the oak door, and spoke. His voice was deep, gravelly, and saturated with the kind of authority you can't buy. "I hear," he said, his voice carrying easily in the frozen air, "there is an accounting tonight." I was a statue of disbelief. Then my phone buzzed, sharp and insistent. A high-priority security notification from the executive accounts at Northline. My gloved fingers fumbled with the screen. "Security alert. A new titling transaction has been recorded associated with your name. An entity, Long Household Emergency Fund, has been linked to a UCC-1 filing against Northline Strategies assets. UCC-1 filing." It was gibberish to most, but not to me. My job required me to understand the language of power. A UCC-1, Uniform Commercial Code, filing is the language of debt. It's a public declaration that someone has a commercial lien on your assets to secure a loan. If you default, they take the collateral. I looked up. George Whitaker was no longer looking at the door. He was looking directly at me. He had seen the blood drain from my face. He tilted his head, studying me not with the warmth of a grandfather, but with the cold, piercing assessment of a master auditor who had just found the critical error in a fraudulent ledger. "You're the one," he said, his voice quiet but cutting through the snow-filled air. "You are the one they have been using the most." I turned, walked past the town car, and got into my own. I drove the 2 hours back to Denver, fueled by a cold, crystalline rage. Christmas Eve was over. The war had begun. I didn't take off my coat. I went straight to my home office, to the triple monitors where I managed the narratives of multi-billion-dollar firms. Tonight, I was managing my own. The bank alert was the thread. I pulled it. Deep in the secured portal of my private wealth management bank account were 2 documents I had never seen. The second one was the mechanism of my destruction, a durable power of attorney. It was dated 8 years ago. I had a vague memory of Clara mentioning it. "Just in case, darling, if you're traveling for work." I zoomed in on the signature. It was electronic. A perfect vector image of my own handwriting, lifted from the house title documents I'd signed when I helped Clara refinance her mortgage 5 years ago. It was clean, it was fraudulent, and it was active. That POA was the master key that had unlocked my entire professional life. The UCC-1 filing was the debt. I checked the Colorado Secretary of State website. There it was. Detour Jane Long, secured party, a Scottsdale private lending group. The collateral? All office furnishings, electronics, and intellectual property assets associated with Jane Long at Northline Strategies. They had taken out a high-interest loan against my entire career, my corporate laptop, my bonus structure, my reputation. They had put a commercial lien on my name. The loan funds were dispersed to the Long Household Emergency Fund, the joint account I had always deposited into, and Clara was the only one who withdrew from. The history was not a history of emergencies. It was a ledger of calculated luxuries, cash withdrawals, always just under the $10,000 federal reporting threshold, charges from high-end boutiques in Aspen, spa treatment packages in Scottsdale, Arizona. Clara's memo lines were almost satirical. Family gifts, household maintenance, required travel for health. That bracelet Queen had flashed? I saw the $5,000 charge from a private jeweler in Cherry Creek. My sister was wearing a Christmas gift financed by a fraudulent lien against my job. I was not the successful daughter. I was the primary asset. I was the mark. You see the cold calculation in this identity theft? They weaponized family trust and financial jargon like POA and UCC1 to destroy a life. You have a social security number. You have a family. Are you sure you're not the next target? If you just watched this and didn't hit the subscribe button yet, you are telling the algorithm you don't care about financial security or legal revenge. Comment now and tell me, do you check your credit report every week, or are you hoping a rich grandpa shows up to save your corporate assets? I remembered George's threat. I hear there is an accounting tonight. He knew. His reappearance on the exact night this UCC1 was triggered was no coincidence. I found the Whitaker Living Trust document. It was designed with surgical precision. Distributions were conditional. They were available only to beneficiaries who were self-sufficient, gainfully employed, and not demonstrably dependent on the charity or assets of others, an independence clause. But the real kicker was the 2-page addendum. It was dated 2008, 2 years after his supposed death. The signature was notarized in the Cayman Islands. He hadn't been dead. He had been watching. This addendum was a clawback provision. The intent was brutal. Should any beneficiary utilize fraudulent means, identity theft, forged co-signature, or undue influence to access, attach, or encumber the assets of another beneficiary, all rights to inheritance shall be immediately and irrevocably frozen pending a full audit. He had predicted this. He had written the trap into the trust itself. They weren't just stealing from me. They were stealing from a fellow beneficiary. They had triggered the clawback. The final piece of the puzzle. How did they get my corporate info? I logged into my Northline Strategies corporate portal. I ran an IP trace on the failed request for a corporate supplementary card. The digital signature was unmistakable. The IP address terminated at Clara's house in Cedar Ridge. To populate the request, they'd uploaded a high-resolution scan of my driver's license, the emergency copy I kept in the top drawer of my old childhood desk at her house. I sat back. The shock was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was the work. I was a strategist. This was a crisis, and I knew exactly how to write the narrative. I built a file, a case, my own private ledger. I saved the fraudulent POA. I saved the public filing of the UCC1. I exported the entire transaction history, the receipts for the luxury spending in Aspen. I took a screenshot of the IP trace log. I titled the cover page simply, "For When They Forget." I drove back to Cedar Ridge on December 26th, the day after Christmas. I was no longer the daughter returning home to beg for acceptance. I was the chief strategist walking into a hostile negotiation. George had called at 6 o'clock a.m. "The audit is at 10, he had said, and hung up. I used my old key. I did not knock. Clara sat on the sofa, her festive sweater rumpled, attempting to look bored. Queen was slouched, scrolling furiously on her phone, radiating pure resentment. And in my father's old wingback chair at the head of the room sat George Whitaker. He had pushed aside the holiday decorations, and in their place sat a worn leather-bound ledger and the single white envelope I had dropped on the porch. George didn't look up. "Sit, Jane," he commanded. Clara's lifetime of practiced victimhood snapped into place. "Daddy," she began, the words sounding obscene. "This is a family matter. Jane has always been difficult. To show up here on Christmas Eve, harassing me, you are an ungrateful child, Jane. Everything I've spent has been to keep this family afloat, to give your sister a chance." Queen looked up, puffy-eyed. "Yeah, Jane, you're rich. You wouldn't even miss it. What's the big deal?" George turned to Queen, his gaze heavy. "That bracelet, the one you were flashing, where did the money come from?" Queen stammered. My boyfriend." George pressed. "How did your boyfriend, who I am told works part-time at the ski rental shop, afford a $5,000 piece from a jeweler in Cherry Creek?" He turned to Clara. "This cashmere, the party, the funds." "The household account, of course. The emergency fund Jane contributes for the family," Clara said, indignant. "For the family," George repeated, tapping the ledger. "Emergency trip to Scottsdale. Family gifts from Aspen, cash withdrawals of $9,000 each, all in the same week. Jane, do you have anything to add to this accounting?" This was my cue. Not an emotional outburst, but a presentation. I brought up the transaction log. "The bracelet was purchased on December 10th with this charge," I said, my voice perfectly level. "It was drawn from an account funded by a loan I never applied for, secured against my job. This," I swiped to the UCC1 filing, "is the commercial lien. My name, my corporate assets, pledged as collateral. Clara dismissed it. Oh, paperwork, Jane. I handled the details so you don't have to. You gave me permission, the power of attorney. Remember all those years ago? You signed it. The POA, I said, my voice dropping, is a forgery. The word landed like a stone. Queen, who had been silent, suddenly snapped. You weren't supposed to know. Mom said you wouldn't check. She clapped her hand over her mouth. The trap sprung. The confession was made. George looked at me for a long time. Jane, he said, you have been carrying them for a decade. You financed their disrespect. Do you wish to continue this arrangement? I met my grandfather's gaze. No, I said, my voice clear. I want my name back. The confrontation had been a pre-trial hearing. Now I needed to file the brief. I was on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in downtown Denver. The name on the directory was Call Train Associates, the lawyer I'd hired for a hostile internal audit, Michelle Colra, formerly Maya. She was a lawyer you hired for a decontamination. Michelle didn't smile. Vivian, Jane, she corrected herself. The holidays are a prime time for fraud. You have my full attention for 60 minutes. Start. I gave her the clean corporate narrative. A fraudulent, durable POA executed via signature forgery was used to secure a UCC1 lien against my corporate assets. The primary grantor of my family's trust is alive and has activated a clawback provision contingent on proving this abuse. She didn't flinch. This is not a family dispute, Ms. Jane, she said. You are the victim of a long-term, multi-pronged financial crime. You have two fronts, criminal and civil. We will wage war on both. She brought up a blank whiteboard. We hold the criminal charges in reserve, she stated. We use them as leverage for the civil assault which begins now. We operate on 4 pillars. Pillar 1. Nullify. The POA is the root. We cut it off. She immediately instructed her assistant to draft a revocation of power of attorney and a formal affidavit of forgery. We are putting the bank on notice that any transaction they have honored under that POA since its inception is now their liability, not yours. Pillar 2. Contain. We poison the well. I was instructed to immediately call Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax and place an extended fraud alert and a credit freeze on my file. From this moment, Michelle said, your name is no longer a blank check. Pillar 3. Reverse. The UCC1 lien is the most dangerous active threat, a time bomb. We are filing a UCC3 termination statement, she explained. Think of the UCC1 as the fire. The UCC3 is the extinguisher. This sanitizes my name in the public record. Pillar 4. Freeze. The money. The loan was dispersed into the Long Household Emergency Fund. Clara and Queen would drain the estimated $40,000. We are moving for a temporary restraining order, TRO, an ex parte injunction, arguing that Clara Long has engaged in financial malfeasance and is a flight risk with the assets, Michelle declared. We would ask the judge to flash freeze the account immediately. When you start winning, the low blows begin. The flying monkeys, aunts, cousins, neighbors will start attacking your reputation. The family network, cultivated by Clara for years, suddenly lit up my phone with messages. Your sister is crying. You froze her account. You are a rich, cold monster. I simply forwarded every piece of harassment to Michelle. Her firm sent back a form letter, a legal shield. But the danger got real. Queen's boyfriend, Denzel, drove his beat-up sedan to my Denver apartment garage and keyed my car. This is not just a story of money. It's a story of personal safety. If you're watching this but haven't hit the subscribe button, you're saying you're comfortable with your name being dragged and your life being attacked. Subscribe now to learn how to deploy a legal defense against a family who wants to destroy you, or tell me in the comments why you'd let them win this battle too. A few days later, on the night before New Year's Eve, there was a knock on my door. Not the intercom, but my actual apartment door. I checked the peephole. George Whitaker. I opened the door, my hand on the new security chain. He saw the chain and the new high-resolution camera I'd installed. Good, he said. A necessary upgrade. He walked to my dining table and placed a thin, worn, leather-bound notebook on the surface. It was the original draft of the Whitaker Living Trust. I flipped to the beneficiaries page. Next to Clara's name, written in red ink, was a single, brutal note. Prone to fantasy, lacks structure, a liability. He pointed to a blank page at the end where a sentence written long ago was faded. For the one who knows how to say no when necessary. I am a man who deals in assets and liabilities, Jane, he said. I built an empire on seeing which was which. When I saw my only child saw me only as an asset to be liquidated, I had a choice. You disappeared, I whispered. I reallocated, he corrected. I staged the accident in the Caymans. I transferred my holdings into a series of blind trusts and holding companies, and I waited to see what would happen when the money tap was turned off. Would Queen learn to build something for themselves, or would they simply find a new asset to gut? They found you, he stated. You knew, I whispered, the whole time you were watching? The auditors always reported to me, George confirmed. I saw the trust being drained for medical parties. I saw them start with your student loan cosigns, then the car, then the credit cards. I saw the forged POA when it was first filed. I did nothing. Why let it get this bad? His voice dropped into a low, hard rumble. Because you cannot save a person who will not say no. You were a willing participant, Jane. You paid for their approval. You financed their disrespect. You were as much a liability to yourself as they were to you. I was waiting for the one who knew how to say no. The UCC1 filing was the final step. They were no longer just gutting you, they were gutting your corporation. They were destroying the very asset they were feeding on. It was unsustainable. The full weight of his confession hit me. He hadn't abandoned me. He was waiting for me to save myself. George Whitaker is a ruthless man of cold, hard wisdom. His words should chill you to the bone. You cannot save a person who will not say no. You finance their disrespect. This isn't just a story about financial fraud. It's a terrifying lesson about personal boundaries. If you're nodding your head right now, recognizing a toxic family member in your own life, you need this story to continue. Subscribe and secure the final chapter where the master strategist wins. Or comment right now with the name of the most important life lesson you just know you're going to miss if you click away. The grand finale was staged not in a courtroom, but in the private dining room of a high-end Denver steakhouse. Clara and Queen arrived, not furious but hopeful. They were dressed in their best, looking like they were attending the reading of a will, believing they were the sole heirs. They thought the TRO and the hearings were just a test, a performance, and George was finally going to welcome them back. Daddy, thank you for bringing us all together. This is what family does, Clara gushed, kissing his cheek. Queen, in a dark blue silk blouse, played the devoted granddaughter, even pouring him a glass of vintage wine. She did not pour one for me. George cut through the performance. We are here to discuss the future. Accounts should be settled before a new year begins. He gestured to a triple-locked box in the center of the table. This box contains the foundation of our family's trust. I want each of you to write down one single sentence, your definition of minimum fairness, the one non-negotiable principle upon which our family and its finances should be built. Clara was ecstatic. She wrote her sentence instantly. Queen calculated, then scribbled something down. I took the pen. I knew this was not a test of love. It was a binding statement. We slid our cards into the slot. George produced 3 old-fashioned brass keys, turned the locks, and lifted the lid. The box was absolutely empty. The cards are not in the box, George said. He pointed to a dark landscape painting on the wall. It flickered. It was a high-resolution monitor. On the screen in their own handwriting were their closing arguments. Clara Long, family must always be put above all else. Queen Long, everyone deserves a second chance. Jane Long, return each name to its owner. A small document scanner is built into the table, George said conversationally. It copies, it analyzes, and it saves. This is an affidavit. Clara, you believe family is a shield to hide behind. Queen, you believe second chances are something you are owed. And Jane, she just wants her name back. The doors slid open. George's assistant, Mr. Allen, walked in with a manila envelope. It contained a recording recovered by the forensic audio team. George played the audio. It was Queen's boyfriend, Denzel, being coached to vandalize my car. The recording also contained Queen's voice, calmly discussing how she and Clara planned to use the forged POA to drain my corporate accounts before the end of the fiscal year, and their panic when the account was frozen. The 3 cards were not a test of love. They were an irrevocable affidavit of intent. My sentence, return each name to its owner, was the only one that didn't demand an entitlement. George stood up. I am done being a judge in my own family. he announced. "I have transferred all necessary documents to the court and to my appointed agent. Jane, you have my full support. Your father's house is no longer your mother's sanctuary of fraud. It is the collateral for the debt she owes you. Her eviction hearing is tomorrow." Clara collapsed into a fit of primal, shrieking hysteria. Queen just stared at the table, her hand going to the diamond bracelet that now felt like a shackle. The final act is always in the courtroom. Clara and Queen, the architects of fraud and the entitled scammer, are about to face the consequences they never believed would come. They still think they can talk their way out of this financial felony. Are you going to let them? If you still haven't hit that subscribe button, you're telling the universe you don't believe in karma. You're telling the algorithm that fraud and betrayal are acceptable. Subscribe now to witness the final verdict and see justice served, or let us know in the comments why you believe Jane should forgive and forget this massive identity theft and allow her mother to keep the house. The courtroom was a study in stillness, cold oak and old granite. George sat beside me, an impeccable pillar of support. Clara and Queen sat opposite, their lawyer, a sweaty, unprepared public defender they'd hired last minute, whispering frantic advice. The judge, Judge Alamine, was cold, efficient, and direct. The evidence was irrefutable. Michelle's TRO, the canceled POA, the UCC3 termination, the bank records detailing the systematic bleed, George's sworn testimony, the audio recordings of the car vandalism, and the fraudulent loan that violated the Whitaker Trust's clawback provision. When the judge finished reading the verdict, she did not look at Clara or Queen. She looked at me. The hammer fell. The court finds financial fraud and identity theft proven. The house located in Cedar Ridge, Colorado, is hereby transferred to Ms. Jane Long as the primary secured party to satisfy the commercial lien and for damages. All distributions from the Whitaker Trust to Clara Long and Queen Long are permanently suspended. George reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out something small, heavy, and glinting. It was a massive, old-fashioned, polished brass key. In front of the judge, the bailiff, and our entire broken family, he placed the key in my hand. It was not a gift. It was a coronation. It was the public and final judgment of morality. "No!" Clara shrieked. It wasn't a word. It was the sound of a soul being ripped out. "No! My house! Mine!" She lunged for the key, her face a mask of primal, feral rage. The court bailiff, who had seen this coming, caught her and restrained her. "That is enough, ma'am. Order!" Clara was held back by the officer. She was not a matriarch. She was not a victim. She was just a woman screaming. Queen did not move. She just turned her back to all of us. Her hand went to her wrist, to the diamond tennis bracelet. Its sparkle, which she had flashed so proudly on Christmas Eve, now seemed to hang on her like a shackle, a heavy, glittering weight. I stood there, the heavy brass key digging into my palm. I closed my fingers around it. It was warm. I looked at the oak doors of the courtroom, and I thought of the oak door of the house. The one that had been slammed in my face. That door was now mine. I took a deep, steady breath. The air felt clean. It felt new. George was watching me. He saw the key in my hand. He saw the look on my face. And for the first time, he was not the grantor, not the auditor, not the strategist. He was, for 1 second, my grandfather. He gave a single, slow, satisfied nod. "You just got your name back," he said. "Thank you for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please comment below with your district, state, or area where you're watching this from. Share your thoughts on whether George was right to wait. Subscribe to Wisdom Tales Hub. Like this video and give it a huge hype boost by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people who need to protect themselves from financial fraud.